we're certainly going to have to look at the impact of the strikes that were taken. I also assume that those are not the only strikes that we'll be taking against the Khorasan group or the other strikes that we took in Syria. It'll take a prolonged period of time for these strikes, and then ultimately for the ground troops that will have to come in and deal with these people.
The U.S. Attorney General, who, by the way, announced his timetable for resignation today, which we will cover a little bit later on, right here on MidPoint. Now, to the moment at hand. It is a common phrase bandied about by the media as if it were the simplest of things to do, putting those boots on the ground to win a war. All too often the phrase is misused, mangled, overhyped, and doled out with no real thought as to what it means. Who is in those boots and what they can and cannot do in a war that has no real front lines. Let us welcome to MidPoint a veteran of Operation Iraqi Freedom, serving 6 years in the Army on active duty and achieving the rank of captain, one who has put a foot in the dirt and understands reality, and host of the syndicated radio program bearing his name. Let's welcome Michael Koolidge to MidPoint. Michael, thank you so much for being here today.
Great to be on with you, Ed.
Michael, here's a great comment that comes from, and I want to get this correct here, this comes from the Washington Times, and I want to quote, "What a waste of time." And this talks about specifically what we're going to talk about here today. "We have not learned a thing in 80 years. And this comes down to boots on the ground, tactics on the ground, and fighting terrorists such as what we are fighting right now." That came from Larry Johnson, a former CIA analyst and counterterrorism official at the State Department. A waste of time. Do you agree with him?
No, I don't agree that it's a waste of time. And I think, when you intro the segment, you brought up a great point that this phrase, boots on the ground, is used a lot, and it's not understood. I'm not a military strategist. I was a low-level platoon leader in the early part of my Army career. And when I was in Kuwait and Iraq in the beginning of Operation Iraqi Freedom, I mainly held a desk job. We just want to put that out there. But I have had my physical boots on the ground in Iraq. And the debate, and I think the phrase that should be used by the president and by the administration, is ground forces. We're not sending ground forces. We're not sending armored divisions and infantry divisions into Iraq. That doesn't preclude the idea of sending special forces groups in, or different types of people who will play some sort of a role on the ground in Iraq that is needed. And that might get into the 4 digits or so of personnel, a couple of thousand people maybe. But I think the president and so many of his advisors are trying to have it both ways. They're saying we're not going back to war, we're not sending boots on the ground, but in reality they are sending men and women who are physically there and have experience in ground operations, but we're not necessarily sending the 82nd Airborne Division or the 101st Airborne Division or the 3rd Armored Division there. And until we do that, this debate about boots on the ground, I think, needs to go away.
Well, let's get right down then to what these boots on the ground are, because it's, to me, again, and coming from a military background and knowing a little bit, just enough to pretend that I know what's going on sometimes with military strategy, as some people do.
Me too.
There you go. But every time I hear that, people always imagine, I think, divisions walking in, thousands of troops coming in, fully armed to the teeth, carrying weapons, carrying their backpacks, living, breathing, eating, sleeping there on the ground. But that is not what the 21st century war demands, and certainly not what this demands. Isn't there something else that has to come first, such as CIA, analysts, interpreters, snitches on the ground, people like this? That is all part of what reality strikes when it comes down to being on the ground in a war, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And so much of it has to do with what is physically on the ground right now. You've got these ISIS forces in many urban areas, and there's been a debate about airstrikes and how much effectiveness that can have. Once the enemy is in a urban and in a city environment, there's only so much that air forces can do.
They blend in. They become part of the population, which we have seen now for decades.
Exactly. So in order to have any sort of effectiveness, you do have to have, like you mentioned, CIA operatives, special forces operatives, maybe not in uniform. They're physically on the ground. And so I think, again, this whole debate is about the debate. The president, it's an old thing in Army terminology. We're always fighting the last war. Well, I think in this debate, in America, we're having the last debate. We're still in this debate about the Iraq War, whether it was right or wrong, and the premise that the president always starts with is that it was a wrong war, and I'm not going to make those mistakes that my predecessor made. He needs to get over that. That's the past. He needs to articulate to the American people what the mission is here, what success looks like, what victory looks like, and then do it.
However, is it not fair to say, because when we're looking at some of the video that we're finding right now, the military has released of the buildings that are blowing up, the tactical missiles that have been used here in the last 72 hours. But to be fair, and on the other side, don't you have to take out these buildings? Don't you have to take out the bomb-making facilities where the vehicles may be stashed, where the weapons may be stashed? Obviously, they're going to scurry like cockroaches. Any enemy will by the time you start bombing these places. But you do have to go after them. So airstrikes are absolutely proper in this case. It's a matter of what follows after them, correct?
Yes, absolutely. I'll tell you, and that is extremely impressive what our air power is able to do. I remember the first time I ever spent a night in Iraq. It was in Baghdad, in the main palace there that Saddam Hussein did his operations from, which eventually became our headquarters. And on the top ceiling there was a hole no bigger than 3 or 4 basketballs length in diameter, and that was from a missile that we struck at that building that took out a certain section of a building. Didn't even take out the entire building, took out a certain section of our building. And this term surgical strike gets used a lot. We have the ability to do that. We have the ability to hit guys from the air in specific parts of a building, let alone just a building. But you're exactly right. What happens after that, what happens when the ones that survive scurry around, are they just going to go to another building? Or are they going to go underground where we can't get them? That's where you need some significant ground forces.
When you get down to these ground forces now, and when you start going after them, what are we talking about? Again, you've been in the military. You at least have an idea here of what goes on. But what are we talking about here? A couple hundred? A couple thousand? And what kind of an idea are we talking about in time? And having said that, I need to point out that already within hours after the first attack happened, there were critics out there going, what do we do next? Where do we go next? You still have to take time to assess where you're at. You have to know what you've struck. You have to know what kind of damage you've done. And then you have to get it right the second time. So there is still that time that you need in order to prepare. This is not like World War II where you just kind of roll in with tanks and large groups of men and just start shooting anything that moves.
Right. And let me be clear that I'm not advocating that at all right now. We shouldn't be sending divisions of tanks and infantry into this right now. Hopefully, this war is prosecuted properly by the Department of Defense and by our president in a responsible, smart way, where the special forces and the ground forces that are helping the good guys, in effect, call for fire properly and kill the enemy, assist the Iraqi forces and this new one now with the Syrian forces do their job. Hopefully we're able to accomplish the mission with that. If that's not able to be accomplished, if we are talking about failures in the coming months, then we can have the discussion about actual divisions and units of ground forces in there. We're not there yet, but let's hope that our military and the president is responsible and does this right in the coming months.
Mike, couple minutes that we have left here. Whether we're in the air, whether we're on the ground, no matter which way it is, your opinion on this, should it not be, don't show any mercy whatsoever. Don't go in looking to capture. Don't go in looking to try and surgically take care of things. But there are those people who will say, you go in, no mercy, take them out as quick and as dirty as possible. Yes or no?
Absolutely. No equivocation whatsoever. We've got to, not to get trite or with the cliches, but go big or go home. But again, going big doesn't mean 100,000 forces. Going big means absolute relentless forces and power and military might. Some of them might not even be manned. We can do a lot of damage with drones now. We can do a lot of damage with missiles from Navy aircraft or Navy craft in the area. I'm an Army guy, so my Navy terminology isn't as sharp. But there's a lot of damage we can do with the current assets we have in the region. Let's put the pedal to the metal with everything there right now and show these guys that we mean business, and then assess the damage, assess the situation at the objective. And if we need to send in follow-on forces to further the mission, then so be it. But yes, we absolutely should leave nothing off the table right now in this. And we need to stop. And when I say we, I mean the president needs to stop with the telling everyone and telling the world what we aren't going to do. We should just say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to kill ISIS. We're going to show them no mercy. And afterwards we can discuss the situation as it stands.
Maybe not even tell them, just go ahead and do it, and don't worry if the American public knows what's going on, but at least just take care of the enemy. There you go. Michael Koolidge, pleasure to have you on the show, my friend. Look forward to the next time.
Thank you very much, Ed.
All right, later on this hour, the actor who decided to take on the cops about racial profiling and came out looking more like a profiled fool than anything else. And after the break, the reality of a world where everything is done online. Better forget that cash. That and so much more coming up on MidPoint, where we question everything.